This is the story of the one. As a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility, he knows keeping the line up and running is a top priority. That's why he chooses Grainger. Because when a drive belt gets damaged, Grainger makes it easy to find the exact specs for the replacement product he needs. And next day delivery helps ensure he'll have everything in place and running like clockwork. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
It's KFI AM 640, and you're listening to The Conway Show on demand on the iHeartRadio app.
It is The Conway Show, and it's Friday.
Yes!
King Kong with you. Yeah. All right. Time to fly around here a little bit, roll around. And first of all, we got a lot of news to get to. There's been a shakeup in the in politics with Robert Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr. And so we'll get into that in a little bit. But first, we start with Alex Stone. Alex, how you, bub?
Happy Friday, Tim. How you doing?
Oh, I love that. I love that term. Hey, Alaska Airlines is in the news. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. The pilot, remember this guy from last October, the pilot who was on shrooms and tried to take down the plane when they were going.
84 people on board or something?
Yeah, Everett to San Francisco. Yeah, 83 people on board. And they were flying along, and you'll remember that all of a sudden the news came out that this plane that diverted, that it was a pilot who was in the cockpit who tried to bring down the plane. That was the allegation, and the pilots radioed in who were flying that they had another pilot in the cockpit in the jump seat, and that he had gotten up and tried to kill the engines, and they radioed in.
We've got the guy that tried to shut the engines down out of the cockpit.
And then they diverted to Portland, but that pilot, Tim, Joseph Emerson, he was, no longer is, was an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 captain who was flying home to also fly out of his base in San Francisco from Everett after he had gone on a trip up there, and he told police in that moment that he had been taking psychedelic mushrooms, been depressed, that a buddy of his had died. He had been dealing with trying to get over it, but could not report it to anybody because he would lose his flying license, his pilot's license.
So why not take the plane down?
Well, so yeah, he'd been dealing with it. Anyway, he's talking to us now for the first time publicly and explaining what went on. He's facing 84 charges and sitting down with his wife, and they're telling us this.
Sarah and I would like our story to be of some value. Right, we think it tells the larger story on pilot health.
So he says he was in that
stop shrooming.
He was sitting, sitting behind the two pilots who were flying, riding in the jump seat. And in that moment, nothing felt real. That he felt like he was in a dream. He had no control. He had taken shrooms 2 days earlier.
Wow. But
now, and anybody who's taking shrooms is going to tell you 2 days later you shouldn't still be tripping on them. Although doctors say there is a condition that can extend it over several days, that maybe he has that. They don't know. But anyway, he says he felt like he was in a dream, had no control.
There was a feeling of being trapped. Like, am I trapped in this airplane? This is not real. I need to wake up.
So he says that he was hallucinating. He stood up, pulled the handles, meant to shut off the engines if there were a fire on board, and didn't get them pulled all the way down. There are two handles up in the ceiling that you got to pull to get them out of there. And as he was going for them and getting them out, the flying pilots grabbed his hands and ripped them off. And then he says,
what I thought is, this is going to wake me up. I know what those levers do in a real airplane, right? And I need to wake up from this. It's 30 seconds of my life I wish I could change, and I can't. Observe the pilots react to the difficult situation that I just handed. And I said, you guys want me off the flight deck? I'm off the flight deck.
And they said, yeah, we want you off the flight deck. Get out of here.
We want you off the plane.
Yeah, go out that. Well, that's the other thing. So he tried to apparently go out the door. So he went out of the cockpit, and then they were at altitude, tried to grab the handle of the emergency exit door. He says a flight attendant jumped in.
I put my hand on the lever. I didn't operate the lever. She put her hand on mine. And I think around that period is when I said, I don't understand what's real. I need you to tough cuff me.
And so she put him into flex cuffs right then. But his wife says that she got this text message from him only saying, I made a big mistake. And she looked at a flight tracking app and could see they were diverting and had an emergency. And she started freaking out, not knowing what it was. But so he says that this all goes back to the way the aviation industry works is if you say you've got anxiety, depression.
That's why they don't report it.
That's the problem. Yeah. And that he did not want to report it, so he turned to alcohol, then turned to shrooms. And so he says, look, that they've got to revisit this because pilots and air traffic controllers that they are running the skies, secretly hiding that they've got these issues, and he says he wants that to change.
Right now, there's a perception out there that if you raise your hand and say something's not right, there's a very real possibility that you don't fly again.
That's right. He says he feels like he's got this mission now, Tim, to get out there and try to change things, to allow people to get treatment and maybe get back into it. He put it this way.
I think if pilots and controllers were able to obtain a proper diagnosis and be in a proper course of treatment, and if they're safe in that course of treatment, right, keep pilots, controllers undergoing treatment who are safe on the job, I think that's a better system.
But he says right now the pilots, people are hiding it. They don't want to lose their job. They don't want their family to look at them that way. They don't want to. Some of them are making $300-400 a year. They don't want to walk away from that.
Right,
so he's calling for changes.
You know, there's a symptom that I investigated this long time ago because shrooms were popular in the 70s and 80s, and I had 3 buddies that did them, and I took them to the racetrack, and that was a mistake. But it's called Largo Shroomo. Shroomo. It means long time shrooms. Anything over 24 hours. Largo Shroomo is an old term.
Are those the expensive ones that you get?
I don't know. I don't know if the expensive ones are not. But I took 3 buddies to the racetrack, and they all did shrooms. I was driving my mom's station wagon. Quite a day, by the way.
And they were going, look at that dragon flying in over the...
No, but they on the way to Hollywood Park, they must have asked me 500 times, hey, why did we take these things? They don't work. Why did we take these things? They don't work. They don't work. They don't work. Then bang, they hit, and I take them to the racetrack, and all 3 of them come up and they're pissed at me. And like, hey, you said we were going to the racetrack. I said, where do you think we are? And you said we're going to the horse races. I said, that's where we are. He goes, no, there's pigs out on that track, Tim.
Those pigs aren't flying, but they're sure running.
And then they saw this kid ask for an ice cream, and the dad said no, and they all broke down crying. And I took them home, and they cried all the way back to the valley.
What a pain!
That guy
it doesn't sound like any fun.
That kid should have had ice cream. Like, I can't wait to drop these 3 idiots off. God, but you know what? That guy's onto something. You remember the German airline? That the guy committed
went into the mountain?
Yeah, that was suicide. And he ended up killing, 120
remember the
people.
JetBlue pilot who freaked out a number of years ago, came out, they pulled him out of the cockpit, he was screaming and whatnot, maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago. This is a real issue, but they got to debate. Is it better for people to hide it?
No, it's better to come forward,
or come clean and have a way to get over it? But then people are up there with mental health issues and maybe on meds.
Yeah. I always look at the pilots, and I can eyeball them and see if they got mental problems. I'm pretty good
looking at them going, I don't know about that guy.
Keep an eye on that guy over there.
You know? But it's kind of like blood pressure meds or cholesterol. They can take those and then be cleared to fly. So should they be able to take anxiety medication and get up there in the cockpit?
But it is remarkable how freely we get on a plane and surrender our lives to the 2 guys in front who we've never met.
Oh, 100%.
You know, especially
you don't know who they are, or what kind of day they're having.
You know, if they just got divorced, if their wife left them, if something happened to their kids, whatever it was.
Yeah, I boarded a plane one time at Burbank Airport, and pilot came out and just berated a woman for being scared of flying. And it was early in the morning, and everybody looked and went, wow. And he went back in the cockpit and flew, but you have that moment where you're going, this guy is angry.
Yeah.
And he's the captain, and he's angry because she's scared and wants to get off. And they have bad days too, but you don't want to be on board.
I'll tell you a quick story here. I know we got to take a break.
Yeah.
I was flying with Harvey Korman, my dad, up to Reno. They were going to do a show up there. And Harvey gets on the plane, and he says hi to the 2 stewardesses, back then, flight attendants now. And this is, late 90s, early 2000s. And he was talking to them for a while, very pleasant. They remember the Carol Burnett show, asking about it. And then he said, hey, where are the pilots? Because the cockpit was empty. And the 2 women look at him and say, oh, we're the pilots. And he said, okay, nice to meet both of you. Off the plane.
Oh, can you imagine
right
now?
Off the plane.
It's that's how it's supposed to be now. That's how it goes. And
he got off.
Yeah, it was a different era back then.
He said, I'll catch you on the next one. And we stayed on the plane. We didn't care. My dad and I didn't care. But he took the next flight. It got in 2 hours later.
You know what? As long as they're good pilots.
And I asked him, I said, why does that bother you? He goes, Tim, if this plane is going down, I want guys pushing and pulling every lever until they hit the mountain. I don't want
But you know what? Everything is computer-driven now. They can push and pull all they want.
I know. But I didn't want a woman yelling into a microphone, tell my husband I love him. Anyway, all right, buddy, appreciate you coming on. Alex Stone, everybody. Ding dong with that guy.
You're listening to Tim Conway Jr. on demand from KFI AM 640.
It is Friday. Ding dong. All right, we got a lot to get to, including Robert F. Kennedy, RFK Jr., suspending his presidential bid. And I don't want to get into the politics of it. I don't like when people jump ship. I don't like when Republicans become Democrats or Democrats become Republicans. I don't know how you do that. Your whole life, you're heavily entrenched in one party, and then you snap and you go to the other party. I don't know. I don't like it either way. I really don't. But so take the politics out of this just for a second, if we can, because there's a bigger issue that Robert Kennedy is talking about, RFK Jr. is talking about, and it's the health of children. This is an issue that both campaigns should be on. Kamala Harris should be on it. Donald Trump should be on it as well. The obesity in this country is off the charts. 50 years ago, it was less than 1% of kids in the country were obese. And now it's 67%. It's not going the right direction. I don't blame the kids at all. I blame the food that they're eating and the choices that they're making. The parents aren't great. I'm one of them. I'm not great with the choices that my daughter makes. And I'm probably the typical parent. When your kid's born, Crozier, you probably went through this. When your kid is born, you say, no fast food, only great food. And then 2 weeks into it, you're like, okay, maybe you should get at McDonald's. What the hell?
Yeah, the thought was there, yes.
Yeah, you try. You try. Sometimes you make it. Most of the times you don't.
You got a whole list of stuff that you're like, don't do this, do this.
Right.
And some stuff you can hold on to, and other ones go by the wayside in a day or two.
That's right. And it doesn't make you a bad person. It just, it is so complicated. Look, when you need a license to go fishing, you need a license to drive, you need a license to fly. You need a lot of, there's a lot of areas in this world. You need a license to practice medicine, to practice law. There's a lot of areas where you need to be educated in life. But man, when you have a kid, they don't give you any handbook at all.
There are all the books out there.
Yeah.
And I read a bunch of them. And I don't know where those books are now, and they weren't really much.
But you don't know what, there are a lot of books out there.
It's a lot of generalities.
Right, but you don't know which one is true and which one is false,
right.
Which one makes sense, which one doesn't.
A lot of them do contradict each other.
Yeah, like in flying, there's only really one way to fly. That's, to get from point A to point B successfully.
Right.
When you get a fishing license, you either catch fish or you don't. Yeah. And, there's not a lot of books on how to do it. There's a lot of old guys that know, tell you what kind of bait to use. But when you have a kid, there's no handbook that everyone agrees on how to raise a child.
And I will say, if you are a good parent, you, like me, even on my daughter turning 23 yesterday.
Oh, happy birthday. I didn't know that.
Yeah, big 23.
Oh, that's great, buddy.
But I mean, even now, I look back on it and there's so many things I'm going, man, I should have done this, or why did I do that? You still, if you care, that's half the battle.
Buddy, look, I did this, and I can still remember, and I still get goosebumps when I tell this story. But I took my daughter to the Santa Barbara Zoo, and I drove up there. Yeah, she was in the back seat in the car, facing forward. It wasn't, she wasn't so young where she was facing backwards.
Yeah.
She was facing forward. And I drove her from Santa Barbara all the way back to our home in the San Fernando Valley. I get in the back to take her out of her car seat because she was asleep. She was not buckled in.
Oh, and you still think about that to this day?
I still think of that every day.
Yep.
Every day.
Yep.
When I took her out of the car, thank God her mom didn't see that. I drove back with her on the freeway, sometimes doing 70, 75, maybe occasionally 80. She was not buckled in.
Woo. Yeah, right. That lingers.
I couldn't believe that happened. Because any kind of accident, it's over. You know, she would have been flying out of the car or in the car. It would have been my fault. I would have never gotten over it. Look, I've gotten over not buckling her in on that trip.
What the video that came out? What was it? Just a few days ago about the guy who had the crash in a Jeep.
Oh yeah, the
had
two
little kids in it flew out
in diapers.
In diapers.
Yeah,
he didn't have them buckled in.
Right, and they're walking around like they own the joint.
What the?
Yeah. But
themselves off.
But anyway, let me come back and play you a little. Again, nothing to do with politics. I just like what he's talking about kids and about the food in this country. And he said, and here's a quote from RFK Jr. He said, back 120 years ago, if you had a kid, you know, it was a 9-10-year-old kid who weighed 200 pounds, he said you would send them off to the circus. And he wasn't joking. You know, he said that's what happened to, you know, kids who were 9 years old and weighed 250 pounds. And the obesity problem in this country is an epidemic. And it's not the people, it's not the kids' fault. I'm not shaming the kids and blaming the kids. I'm blaming me, society, parents, food, chemicals, fast food, crappy food, all that stuff. That it's adding up and we're not going in the right direction. We're not going in the right direction.
We all want to make the best decision for our kid.
And this is going to be a tremendous problem in the near future. If it isn't already, the amount of diabetes out there for kids, type 1 diabetes or type 2, and the amount of kids dying early, getting cancer early, all this stuff. We've got to, both campaigns, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, they've got to focus on this. We're killing our kids. Killing them. Slowly, but killing them.
You're listening to Tim Conway Jr. on demand from KFI AM 640.
All right. RFK Jr. talking about children's health. He suspended his campaign today, not in all states, in some of the 10 of the battleground states. But I don't think this helps Donald Trump as much as everyone thinks politically. I think the people who backed RFK Jr., a lot of them hate Donald Trump. And so half of them, I think, are going to go to Harris and half of them to Donald Trump. So I don't think it's a big win for Donald Trump, as much as some people think it is. But just 3 weeks ago, I was listening to RFK Jr., and he said something pretty good. He said, in Donald Trump's first term as president, he was there for 4 years, and he always told everybody he was going to drain the swamp. And he said, but the guys that he's putting in, ahead of the FCC, the FAA, the head of the Pentagon, all these guys that are going to be in the head of Commerce, all these guys you're going to put in, RFK goes, those are swamp creatures. Those are swamp creatures. It's such a great term. These guys who've worked their ass off their entire life, they're making, $17 million a year working for a company, and they're reduced to swamp creatures. It really is a great term. All right, let me play some audio here. This is RFK Jr. talking about children's health. It's extremely important. I hope both candidates do it. I hope Kamala Harris does it, and I hope Donald Trump does it as well, because we are going to lose an entire generation of kids unless we can straighten this out. They're obese. The childhood obesity rate in this country is 50%. 50%. You know what it is in Japan? Less than 3, right around 3% in Japan. United States, 50. 1 out of every 2. We can't sustain this. So here he is talking about children and their problem with food.
Today, 2/3, we spend more on healthcare than any country on earth, twice what they pay in Europe. And yet we have the worst health outcomes of any nation in the world. We're about 79th in health outcomes behind Costa Rica and Nicaragua and Mongolia and other countries. Nobody has a chronic disease burden like we have. And during a COVID epidemic, we had the highest body count of any country in the world. We had 16% of the COVID deaths, and we only have 4.2% of the world's population.
Do you hear that? We had 16% of COVID deaths worldwide, and we have 4% of the population. That's not good.
And CDC says that's because we are the sickest people on earth.
Yeah, I think we are. I think we're the sickest nation on earth. And I don't know what to do about it.
The highest chronic disease rate on earth. And the average American who died from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases.
Wow.
So these were people who had immune system collapse.
I gotta say though, man, we go for it in this country. Whether it's sports, whether it's politics, whether it's fighting any of the wars we've fought, this country goes for it. And when it comes to food, we go for it. We enjoy it. We enjoy eating. We love the convenience of fast food. I probably enjoy it more than anybody listening right now. I think I probably eat more fast food than anybody listening right now. I love it.
Who had mitochondrial dysfunction. And no other country has anything like this. 2/3 of American adults and children suffer from chronic health issues. 50 years ago, that number was less than 1%. So we've gone from 1% to 66%.
Wow.
In America, 74% of Americans are now overweight or obese, and 50% of our children. 120 years ago, when somebody was obese, they were sent to the circus.
How about that line? 120 years ago, if somebody was obese, they were sent to the circus. Circus. Hey, Billy, I got good news. You remember how much you liked the circus? Yeah. You're joining it. Ah, thanks, Mom.
There were case reports done about them. Obesity was almost unknown. In Japan, the childhood obesity rate is 3%, compared to 50% here.
Wow.
Half of Americans have pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. When my uncle was president, I was a boy. Juvenile diabetes was effectively non-existent. A typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes during his entire career, a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. And
is that unbelievable? That a doctor would practice for 30, 40 years, see one child with juvenile diabetes, one child. And now a third of the kids that he sees have it.
The mitochondrial disorder that caused diabetes, also causing Alzheimer's, which is now classified as diabetes. And it's costing this country more than our military budget every year. There's been an explosion of neurological illnesses that I never saw as a kid. ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, Tourette's syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, Asperger's, autism.
Wow.
In the year 2000, the autism rate was 1 in 1,500. Now, autism rates in kids are 1 in 36, according to CDC nationally.
All right, it was 1 in 1,500 with autism. Now it's 1 in 36. We've got to put this together. This is not going in the right direction. This country may not be around in 3 or 4 generations if we keep going down this road.
I don't doubt the numbers are much higher now than they were in the past.
Yeah.
I do wonder about the actual saying that that them being able to identify autism in kids back then.
Yeah, I think you're right. There probably were more kids that are autistic, and they'd
were misdiagnosed or not diagnosed as at all.
Well, when I was growing up, if somebody had it, and I'm sure kids in my class had it, if not me personally, I was diagnosed with probably Asperger's, but it was just we were just told that we were slow.
Well, and even to point to himself. RFK Jr.'s aunt was she was put in a mental institution when she was just a small child. She was in there for her entire life. She had multiple brain surgeries and all that stuff. I wonder if they look at the science and the medicine of it now, what she would have been diagnosed back then.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
But I don't doubt one bit. Like the numbers that he's saying that they're much higher now than they were then.
Yeah, and we talked about this yesterday. That German tourist that came over. And he said the 15 fascinating things he noticed about America, and one of them was how big people are. People are huge.
There is no doubt about that.
Yeah, and you see it all the time, and it's not their fault, man.
Was it Gary?
We really let them down.
Gary Shannon said, being in Chicago, they got a nice little taste of the average size of people in the Midwest like that.
Yeah, Yeah, I think in the Midwest it's even worse than out here. Because out here, you can cycle and work out and play tennis all year round.
And it's people are much more conscious about.
Right, but in Chicago, you can't go outside and exercise in December or January. Exactly. You die.
And the food is
Yeah, it's 40 below. You're going to go play tennis? 40 below. It's not going to happen. All right, but I think he's got a point, and I think it's really important as well. Those are really terrible numbers for this country.
You're listening to Tim Conway Jr. on demand from KFI AM 640.
We started with Alex Stone. He was great. Talking about that pilot that was shrooming. Oh, man. Almost killed 84, 85 people on Alaska Airlines. And he's coming out saying, look, there's mental illness in pilots, and they don't want to talk about it because they're going to get fired. They're not going to be able to fly afterwards. And so they keep it to themselves, and that's how you get a guy in the cockpit trying to shut the engines down at 30,000 feet. Speaking of drugs, Matthew Perry comments about using ketamine. Let's find out what's going on here.
Ketamine felt like a giant exhale. I would disassociate, see things. Oh, there's a horse over there? Fine, might as well be.
This is Matthew Perry. That's in his own words, too, from the book he wrote.
Ketamine felt like a giant exhale. I would disassociate, see things. Oh, there's a horse over there? Fine, might as well be.
Matthew Perry's comments about ketamine resurfacing in the wake of arrests and shocking details from the Friends star's death investigation.
I'm drawn to characters that set out to improve themselves.
Perry getting candid in his 2022 memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing.
Yeah, he and I have the same acting philosophy. Where I also pursue characters that want to improve themselves. And so I turned down a lot of roles. Yeah. Well, Croge, you know this about me, but a lot of listeners don't. I do radio to pay the bills, but the silver screen is my first love.
You say that all the time.
Yeah. Just couldn't make a living at it, so sucks.
So
I was also,
you loved it, but it just didn't love you back.
Didn't love me. No, not at all.
I was also doing ketamine infusions every day.
Wow, every day.
To ease pain and help with depression. Has my name written all over it. They might as well have called it Maddie.
For Perry, at first, ketamine seemed like the long-awaited answer to his mental health struggles. But he said its psychedelic effects inspired thoughts about death.
I would disassociate, see things. Oh, there's a horse over there?
Yeah. I like to get buzzed every once in a while. I don't like to get really effed up.
Yep.
I don't like that. I don't like to lose that kind of control.
Yep.
And that's why I could never, when you drink a beer, you're pretty much, where the alcohol content in that beer is. And it's usually between, the difference between maybe 3 to 4 or 5%.
When I went to college in Frostburg, I was probably one of the very few people in the entire dorm that did not do drugs that year.
Is that right?
Yeah, because I had to think about, one, I grew up around it with my dad and all, but it was always a control thing for me.
Yeah.
I was always afraid of not having complete control. And alcohol, at least I felt like I was aware of what was going on around me, and it just, all the other stuff was, yeah.
Yeah, like if you have a strong beer, it might be 10% alcohol. If you have a weak beer, it might be 5%.
Right.
But there's not a big difference. But if you take a hit off a joint, you might get buzzed. Or, as Adam Carolla said, you might be naked in the desert in an hour looking for turtles.
Yeah, you never know exactly what it is you're doing.
Yeah, you don't know.
Until it's in you.
Right, and then it's too late. And I wish drugs, like at least pot, were more like alcohol, where you knew how strong it was going to be and how many hits you were going to take and all that stuff.
I had two roommates that one guy, his nickname was Drugs.
Wow.
Because he'd been to rehab already 2 or 3 times in his life at that point, and they kept sheets of acid in the little mini fridge in our dorm room.
Is that right?
Yeah, and it was just something I was just like, hey, they were cool and all, but that wasn't for me.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Like, your daughter goes to college and you find out she has sheets of acid.
Giant sheets of
in
acid.
the refrigerator. How quickly you'd take her out of that school.
Right.
My daughter would be out of that school before I got there. Gone.
As the K ran through me, I often thought I was dying during that hour. Oh, I thought, this is what happens when you die.
But what kind of fun is that to get so high that you think you're dying and then you want to do that again? I don't get it, man. I think that's where the sickness comes in.
Yet I would continually sign up for this shit because it was something different, and anything different is good.
Injecting someone over and over who you know is in an abusive cycle, who has a history of addiction, is pretty unconscionable.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. I remember going to the 3rd Street Promenade with Doug Steckler, and we were with a friend of ours, happens to be a woman, she was probably, I don't know, maybe 30 at the time, and she got one of those shroom drinks. You know, it's like...
Oh, right.
You know, you go to one of those health places, they in a blender, they mix up the, I don't know,
Lion's mane,
Yeah,
mushroom,
exactly.
It's very popular now, a lot of the mushroom drinks.
And she took it, and she flipped out. You know, an ambulance was called. They didn't take her away, but they had to sit her down, give her water, and she flipped out for like a half hour. And we finally took her home and made sure she got home. And then the next day I said, "Oh, you'll probably never do that again." And she said, "I can't wait to do it again." And I said, "Wait, but we thought you were going to die." And she said, "I know, but it was different. And I like things that are different." And I think that is part of the sickness, you know, where you think you're going to die, but you're attracted to that. I don't know.
But it's what led to Perry's death last year at 54 years old.
Oh, I didn't know he was 54. I thought he was older. I thought he was in his 60s. He was only 54. Wow.
Mr. Perry fell back into addiction, and these defendants took advantage to profit for themselves.
While Perry was still receiving prescribed and medically supervised treatments at the time, law enforcement says his fatal ketamine doses were obtained via drug dealers and enablers of the well-documented addict.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm pretty tough when it comes to this. Look, if his assistant didn't give him the ketamine, he would have found another assistant to give it to him. Yeah. I think you've got to take some responsibility. I don't like blaming the bartender for over-serving you. I don't like blaming the car manufacturer if you get in a car wreck. I don't like blaming. I think you got to take a lot of responsibility.
A lot of responsibility. Yeah. There's a balance. I wouldn't say an equal balance either, but yeah.
Yeah, I think you do.
Take a little accountability.
Yeah, I think you do. But then again, when you have that kind of sickness where you take a drug where you think you're going to die and you can't wait to take it again.
How are you able to make the smartest decisions for yourself?
Yeah, it's wild, man. It really, really, society is so effing tough.
Yeah, it is.
It really, really is. Man, every single day you make decisions and you hope they're the right ones. All right, we're live on KFI AM 640.
Conway Show on demand on the iHeartRadio app. Now, you can always hear us live on KFI AM 640, 4 to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and anytime on demand on the iHeartRadio app.